Hello, everybody. So I will start now. Thank you very much for attending this new masterclass. I will be presenting for more or less an hour, 50 minutes, more or less, and then we will have as usual, some time for questions and answers. So please. Don't hesitate to put in the chat your questions, and after the session, after my presentation, they will bring me the questions, and we can have that discussion. Okay. This is another topic that we are covering in our focus courses. Remember that we did already a masterclass on value for money, then a contract management. This is the third one. In the coming months, probably in a couple of months or month and a half, we will have another one on risk management, okay? So, which is quite interconnected with this one. This is what we will cover as usual. This is like the first part, introductory part of our focus courses, but I will try to make a overview of all the issues that we are covering in the full courses, in this case about fiscal impact management. The first thing that I will present is about public finance management, fiscal impact management, and how it is allocated in the PPP framework, especially in the institutional framework. We will go through the main elements of fiscal impact management. We will make some reflections of the need, how it is important to control fiscal impact or fiscal risk, PPP fiscal risks. We will make some reflections about the approaches for solving these problems or to controlling fiscal risk. We will make some reflections about how it is important other things, not just controlling the fiscal impact, and we will reflect about the benefits. And then we will introduce the first part of fiscal management, which should be assessing the fiscal impact. So we will talk a little bit about the main types of liabilities, fiscal liabilities, and we will describe, we will give an overview of the fiscal impact assessment process. Fiscal impact management is part of the PPP framework. Is a very relevant part of a PPP framework. I describe it in the CP3P guide. Is one of the most relevant areas of responsibility. According to the CP3P methodology, we have 4 areas of responsibility. The first one, of course, is the project development, is to identify, implement, propose the project for approval, and then manage the contract after, or manage the tender and the contract after contract award, which is basically in the hands of the procuring authority. There is another responsibility, which is coordination and best practice, which has a lot to do with guidelines and policy documents and policy regulations to regulate the process and things that should be done before and after approving a project. There is this other module or sub-framework, if you wish, which is specifically that related to public finance management, which is what we are interested in. And the other responsibility described in the CP3P guide is the approval of projects, the gatekeeping and the green lights for projects. So public finance management is going to influence in coordination and best practice area of management by means of defining guidelines that has to be considered when proceeding with a project through the cycle, and these guidelines will have to be assessed and approved in order for the project to move forward in the cycle. So this responsibility is intersecting with these other two blocks in the PPP framework, ensuring coordination and best practice and approving projects. As I say, basically providing guidelines and providing regulations for the internal process of approvals. And which elements do we have to take into account and to manage in a fiscal impact management system or public finance management system? So basically, three elements: affordability assessment, controlling affordability, assessing the impact or controlling the impact, the fiscal impact; budgeting; and accounting/reporting. Basically, is the same or is quite similar. We will explain a little bit more now. So when we are dealing with affordability assessment, the idea is that we need to identify whether the fiscal commitments coming from a new PPP contract can be accommodated within the fiscal constraints, the fiscal restrictions. Can we pay for this? Can we afford to pay for this project? And this is to be done project by project basis and also from an aggregated point of view. So there will be, or we will face sometimes regulatory restrictions with explicit limits for the overall commitments that according to the framework we can approve or we can admit, and what I call de facto restrictions. It is clear that we don't have the money now, the next year or whatever, or judgment. Because not always there is a specific control mechanism with an explicit limit or cap in the expenditure that we can commit in PPP contracts. But then we will need to apply judgment and decide whether it is convenient for us to assume that level of liabilities. So affordability will require a quantitative analysis, quantifying the impacts, the fiscal commitments, and then evaluating that fiscal impact, which is qualitative. So it's implied a judgment, regardless whether we have an explicit control of the liabilities, as we will explain later on. Because sometimes we can, according to certain regulation, have a limit in the overall amount of liabilities of PPPs, but still, if we are still, I mean, we could be within the limits, but still it could be pretty convenient for us to avoid proceeding with that project because the amount of the specific project can be excessive, or the contingencies can be really very big and putting at risk all the sustainability of the PPP program. As we will describe later on, this should be more than just checking ceilings, checking limits for fiscal exposure. Then we have budgeting as another responsibility within the fiscal impact management, okay? So it's not just to be reasonably convinced that we can pay for the thing, but we need to ensure that the money is properly appropriated, approved, and available to meet any payment obligation. So here, with respect to this, budgeting, by the way, budgeting and accounting reporting are things that I will just mention briefly in this slide, but they are covered in the full course with more detail. So I say that here we need to deal with two things, basically, okay, in a PPP system. One thing is the appropriation risk. Appropriation risk is the risk, the probability that for a certain year of a contract, we don't enjoy an approval of the budget allocation to pay any amount that is committed in the form of a direct liability. We will see this later on, but direct liabilities will be the explicit and uncertain payment obligations, like, for example, an availability payment. And appropriation risk is there because we need to, in the huge majority of frameworks, the budget every year is subject to approval by the legislation. So the parliament will have to approve the law for regulating the budget of a particular year. So the budget could be denied or not approved, or it could be specifically there could be a specific request to remove certain parties, certain items in the budget, like, for example, a particular PPP commitment. So there is a risk. Even if we have entered into a long-term contract, committing contractually a number of payments all over the years of the contract, this is not like a explicit financial obligation of a debt agreement, because when we have a debt agreement signed by the Ministry of Finance, we don't need approval from the budget, from the legislation to the budget. Those allocations are going to be surely approved. It's automatic approval, but not in the PPP commitments unless explicitly we decide to regulate the payments of a PPP, like if they were a debt service. Some countries have removed the appropriation risk, but by dealing with the PPP commitments as if they were the debt service payments of a loan agreement. Okay, that's one potential solution, but it's not very common. The other solution is to establish some kind of liquidity fund to ensure that at least for 3, 4, or 5 years there will be funds enough to cover at least to the medium term those payment obligations. And then the other problem with budgeting is that related to contingent liabilities. Okay, the contingent liabilities, precisely, they are contingent. They depend on an uncertain event. So it is difficult or not too efficient or not too possible really to be sure that we have the money available in the budget for a contingency that could eventuate. So for that reason, one approach is establishing contingency funds. So it's creating against the budget every year according to the value of the risk and recognize an expenditure in advance. So we allocate some funds in a fund, in a reserve. So we have this reserve that we can use in the moment that a contingency arises. Okay. And then accounting and reporting. We need to record and disclose the fiscal relevant information. We need to record all the liabilities and update all the projections of those liabilities to be able to have a proper control of the overall exposure, fiscal exposure of the PPPs, and also for the purpose of transparency, in order to make those commitments public and subject to public scrutiny or an scrutiny of the Parliament. Accounting is by definition a type of report, but not every report is accounting. So when we use accounting, if we are using accounting standards based on IPSAS, the International Public System of Account Standards, which basically are treating PPP commitments in government-based PPPs as if they were a public debt, basically, okay? Then accounting will link with the control that we are looking for. Because I will record the value of future commitments, future payments as a public debt, and I will recognize the asset as a public investment in the budget, as a capital expenditure that I am committing. So that will make the PPP contracts directly under the radar of the conventional controlling mechanisms for fiscal sustainability, which are the maximum deficit every year and a certain maximum, a certain limit of the overall debt as compared to the GDP, okay? But when we are not using IPSAS, there is a problem. So we need to establish specific reports to make apparent which is the level of commitments that we are acquiring. So even, sorry, let me move myself, even if PPP commitments are not recognized as liabilities in accounting, they should be disclosed. So the good practice is disclose those liabilities in notes in the accounting reports, or create specific reports for PPP liabilities.